Alright, comment video, I believe. Probably that's all we'll get to. Probably. Mostly. Anyway, so superior mind had point said in this comment. Well, anyway, I responded to it. I'll get through it quickly. In a laser, only the photons leaving at any time. In a laser, the only photons leaving at any time would be the ones traveling along the correct vector, direction of the laser. But if it were a true point source, different story. Yeah, it's just too simple. You know, I mean, obviously these are complex subjects. Maybe there should be videos just for these complex subjects. You know, how do lasers work? Yeah, it's a lot of weirdness to lasers. So I pointed out traveling along the correct vector. I just couldn't make anything out of that. There's no correct vector. The way the light is created and reflects back and forth, and technically I'm pointing out, no, as I said, no, I don't think so. The photons that leave the laser are the ones that leak around the mirror. That's how I understand lasers work. So obviously they can't be going perfectly straight back and forth anymore. If they were, they wouldn't leak out. That's the catch. How do you get the light out once you have it in the trap? That's the problem. So he says, is it that they believe the perpendicular light reflecting between two parallel mirrors when in motion is not reflecting in a true perpendicular direction? Don't know. This would mean the mirror in motion would reflect at a different angle than the one that isn't. So I don't even know the motion part, just kind of, sorry. Yeah, I can't make too much out of that. The point would be, I think in most cases, is that most motion that would take place would be way slower than the speed of light. So you can't really move things that are close together fast enough to mess up the light. Where things that are far apart, you have some chance of pulling a mirror out. You know, playing a game with the light. I don't know if I want to do a drawing on this, but I guess I will quickly. Like I said, I think I'll try to do separate videos for these things and try to make them universal references. You just always go back to that reference or something like that. I don't know. Just, I think it's unconstructive to keep trying to argue little bits of something in sections, you know, separate little sections out of the context of what we are trying to establish as facts, you know. It's like the two-slit argument. People keep bringing up the same crap, and it's like crap I've been over so many times, and it just ends up being so redundant to have to reassert what I've already demonstrated in my own porch. You know, it's just kind of a waste of time. So anyway, a quick bit on lasers. So obviously the diode lasers are kind of very cheap lasers. So they don't have very good, they're really not reflecting photons and doing all that stuff. So they're not doing what traditional helium laser would do. So the idea is that you have let's say a couple of mirrors, and then you have this idea of a mechanism for popping photons into that stream. So you have a bunch of photons that are, say, popped out into a stream that's going back and forth of photons. And so, you know, between mirrors. And the idea is that the ones that escape are the ones that sort of bounce their way to the edge of the mirror, get away. That's my understanding of how lasers work. So if somebody has some other understanding, see, it'd be nice if they could put a little hole right here in the middle of the mirror, and then all the photons just come out of the middle. But then they would diffract because of the small aperture problem. So that can't work. So these are sort of, because they say they bounce back and forth 100 times, it's going to be a very slight angle, you know, that they're moving at, but there is going to be a slight angle. And that's why the laser, in my opinion, diverges, is because there is a slight angle, because they're not reflecting exactly back and forth. So that's why over time the laser spreads. All right. So that's probably enough on that. A brief, really crude description of the reality, as I understand it. You may understand differently. No law against that. I don't have a proper eraser. I have to make an eraser. So anyway, in case there's another drawing to be done. All right, and this time remember to undo the drawing. Thank you. Okay. Now back to. All right, Bob says 8 o'clock, so another time code, even though I asked him not to do that. That is the problem with the path of the particles too. So I'm supposed to go back to the video, re-listen to my video. I mean, it's very unpractical. They think the path is vague in reality rather than their knowledge of the path is vague because they cannot measure it. Well put. Okay, so he's getting that part anyway. They have a vague explanation, and it seems really funny that they've basically written the vague explanation into their book of God. And so now you can't be more specific because they have their vague. The truth is vague. And they won't allow you to make it clearer. So it's like they've put a blurry picture in the book and they said you can't make the picture clearer. We insist that it stay blurry. Just very ironic. A very backwards way of finding the truth, right? Saying that don't ever get rid of the fog. Don't invent fog glasses or something. No, don't fix it. Leave it broken. Please, 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 please. So this is it. Yeah, I mean, there's so many videos to make and so many subjects. I mean, it's just endless. Anyway, based on how the laser bends. So this is Renard Neal, who's really quite a snarky fucker. But anyway, let's play along. Based on how the laser bends. So again, I don't know, why am I supposed to concede to this bending argument? Lasers don't bend. Photons don't bend. Okay, they can hit something and reflect. But they don't bend on their own. They don't fly crooked paths. They go from point A to point B in a straight line. Now, if you disagree with that, then let's have an argument about that. There's no point in I'm writing a sentence that I have to somehow accept something that's just overtly wrong as a premise. I do not believe lasers bend. It would affect the travel times in LIGO. So again, what do I make out of that? My whole point is LIGO doesn't understand how interferometers work. It doesn't. You people don't understand what's creating the pattern. Okay, you think it's some sort of photon plus photon equals interference bullshit. Newton created Newton's rings, and the pattern is pretty close to Newton's rings, and that's just a single aperture spreading light, okay, by rules, okay, and so, you've assumed that every time there's an on-off pattern, it has to do with some kind of wave interference crap. When there can be lots of reasons, there is a spreading of light, and that light would go at specific angles and all that stuff. So I'm just saying, what I've pointed out, I've demonstrated on my porch, is that the internal reflections that take place inside of the piece of glass create exactly the same pattern. So the light is reflecting inside the glass because the reflective index from the solid piece of glass to air, okay, the angle at which you get total internal reflection is much lower inside the glass. So you don't need a very big angle to have total internal reflection. It's like 44 degrees or something. So the point is you're not at that angle, but you're getting close to it, which means that most of the light's reflecting inside. So it has a 90% chance when it hits the surface of reflecting and 10% chance of going out. And then on the next reflection, the same odds. And the same odds and the same odds. So it can go through like 10 reflections before it pops out as a photon. And that is what's creating your rings. The internal reflection inside the glass. The interferometer is an optical experiment. And you're not getting that. Okay, so that should be the premise of our argument. Is the experiment an optical experiment, or is it an interference experiment? Is it just optics and refraction that are dictating where the photons are going, or is it some sort of special little two photons take different paths nonsense? So fuck you. You are yet again failing to grasp the basic concept behind the arguments. No, I say the same exact thing to you. You're failing to grasp it. All right, that there's two surfaces on every substance. First, you're not even accounting for. There is no such thing as a pure reflection, as I've argued. Do you really think things just bounce off of things? That's it? It just bounces off? No consequence? No mechanism for that reflection? And I'm arguing that no, of course not. There's an actual process to a reflection. It's actually a U-turn that takes place. That you don't get it for free. So I think you're failing to grasp that there's a whole subject you're ignoring, which is optics, okay? And you have such little evidence that this has anything to do with any of your photon interference crap, because you haven't done the experiment with single photons. You haven't even demonstrated where the interference can possibly take place. You haven't even explained to me how mirrors allow wave functions to reflect. How do wave functions reflect off of a mirror without having a collapse of their wave function? So, no, screw you. I failed to grasp. No, you failed to grasp. Okay, so you were already shown. So what is this? This is what, mindless marbles? I mean, I'm so sick of these fake accounts. If you can't do better than fake accounts, then yes, I probably should just start deleting all of these anonymous coward accounts. So if you can't even take the time to create an icon for your name, then yeah, maybe I'll just delete your comments. You were already shown. I wasn't already shown shit, okay? I've dealt with everything I was already shown. I made arguments about everything I was shown. Now, if you can't link to what I was already shown, link to the fucking video you think I've left something unanswered in. You fucking cunt. But I will not accept leaving this on my board, that you've fucking shown me something I didn't answer. Because that's a fucking lie. How the photon bouncing between two mirrors changes the travel time. More horseshit about interferometers. So you can't post this on the interferometer videos that are out there? If you want to continue to argue interferometers, then post it on an interferometer video. What are you posting it here for? Right? The video is not even titled. The title of the video is I dealt with one fucking comment, and then I did a different subject. So you're not even on the subject of the video. You know that, right? I mean, it's just such bullshit. And hence it matters in the distance calculations. So these are just your assertions. You're not providing an example of any of this. You were shown this. I wasn't shown shit, so fuck you. Fuck you. Everything I was shown, I answered. You lying piece of shit. Alright, this means that according to classical mechanics, fuck you in that classical word. I already said, I'm not defending classical mechanics. I don't give a fucking shit about what your stupid titles for your stupid shit. I'll call all of your current mechanics bullshit, because that's what it is. It's all fucking bullshit mechanics. So there's bullshit mechanics and not quite as bullshit mechanics, but that's all there is. You don't understand how a fucking thing works. You don't know where photons come from. You don't know where gravity comes from. You don't know where magnetism comes from. You are so fucking ignorant, and yet you're talking like you have answers to a question. You're fucking clueless, you idiots. Alright, you should be able to tell your velocity using the light. Yeah, you would be. That's my exact point. That's right. If I was in a spaceship and I bounce photons back and forth in front of me, I'll be able to tell exactly how fast I'm going relative to the speed of light, obviously. You're not going to be able to tell you're going 40 miles an hour. But if I'm going 400,000 miles an hour, I'll be able to see it because the laser beam's not going to be, it's going to be pointing exactly, it's going to be telling me exactly how fast I'm going. Yeah, I assert that's the fucking truth. That's right. The laser beam isn't going to bounce forward into the fucking future. It's going to lag behind because your spaceship is moving away from it. That's right. Oh, you fucking idiot. Because the distance calculations would then depend on your velocity. But the problem is that you don't. So it violates relativity. Of course I violate relativity because it's a nonsensical notion. Photons move into the future at the same speed. Yeah, no, they don't do that. They can't do that. It's not possible. Photons don't have two fucking momentums, retard. Venus, when you look at it, isn't where it is now. You're not seeing it where it is. You're seeing it where it the fuck was, retard. the sun isn't where it is now. It's where it was 8 fucking minutes ago. Re-fucking-tard. Okay. You're citing this experiment for one conclusion. No, I'm citing that your theoretical notions of reality are paradoxical and idiotic. On their face, they're stupid. Okay, single slit creates 2 waves. Double slit creates 2 waves. Oh, that doesn't make any fucking sense. But then rejecting all the other conclusions of it. Bull fucking shit line cunt. Alright. In your video, you drew how the laser spot just has to hit the reflectometer, and it can do it at the edges on the spot. All it has to do is hit, because the photon that hits will be moving in a straight line from the telescope that's shooting the fucking laser beam to the reflector. That photon that actually hits the reflector will move in a straight fucking line. And so all it does is have to have any photon. Any photon that hits it will have moved in a straight line from the telescope to the reflector. I agree. Good. But the problem is that whether the laser bends... Oh, here we go again. I do not accept any notion of a bending fucking photon unless it hits a fucking electron. Or not is a matter of 30 kilometers and the spot is only 6 kilometers. So again, you say the spot's 6. I don't know, approximately. I don't think it is that big, but whatever. And again, over the distance... So you're saying that it just doesn't, like I said, if it's a moving target, it just doesn't matter, because the point is to reflect back, the photon has to hit the reflector. And that particular photon, whether it was aimed ahead of time, and then the moon moved into it, doesn't really matter. It's still a straight line. That's all that matters. It's a straight frickin' line. There's no bending. So it does make a difference. No, it doesn't make any difference, because any photon that hits the reflector would have traveled a straight line from the telescope to the reflector. It would not have traveled any kind of bent parabola or any other kind of weird line. It would have been a direct straight line. And the minor differences in how much the moon moves in 1 second, okay, even at whatever, 30 kilometers a second, you say, it isn't enough, okay, in terms of distance from the photon shot to mess up the calculations all that much. And clearly the calculations are just based on comparison to previous calculations. I mean, all they're really doing is saying, let's shoot it, find out how long it takes, and then we can find out another day if it takes longer, then we'll know something's changed. So this isn't like some... as has been pointed out, the speed of light, depending on how you measure it, comes up with little different numbers, subtly different numbers. So this isn't some exact way to figure out exactly how fast the speed of light is. It's just another way to confirm that light is pretty consistent. Alright, in your video, you drew how the laser spot has to hit the reflectometer and can do... No, I already read that. Okay. So, fuck you again. So then this stupid undernet jack, let's see, more fucking crap about telling me backseat driving, how I should interact with the world. Sir, I just fuck that shit, please. Why waste your time on comments? Well, I mean, this is part of the critique, right? I mean, these whiners complain that if you don't waste time on their bullshit, okay, that somehow you're being a fascist and you're obstructing their free speech, and you're pretending they haven't made great arguments. All I can do is point out they're not making great arguments, that they're not very serious about making an argument. They can't cite references, they can't cite experiments, they can't do anything, that's legitimate. And I'm just trying to point that out. Like, they'll say, oh yeah, the experiments has been done, and it's been done by a guy who has a telescope way underpowered for the job, doing it with a fucking camera that doesn't have enough resolution to find enough pictures for the purpose, And then he's using star charts instead of controls. So what I have to explain that to people, right? They make an assertion. I can't just let the assertion sit there. You have to answer their lies. Fuck you. That are either obvious trolls or so far off the mark as to make no sense in relation to the issue. So again, so that's your opinion. So yes, I'm just saying I don't like the idea of pre-censoring. So I'll let them say their shit, and then I'll block them if they've been rude, or they've been way off subject, or they have had no evidence. Then yes, they'll get blocked, because if they're going to make an argument, they have to make it within some confines of politeness and some sort of take the subject at least seriously. And if they can't do that, then they can go fucking goddamn go to hell. So I think my standards are appropriate. I let people who can walk a rational line of disagreeing, and even disagreeing hostilely, but without crossing the line and being a rude, obnoxious cunt. You are spending finite resources, again, you asshole, and perhaps your sanity, beating your head against the proverbial immovable object. Well, I'm sorry, that immovable object has to be moved. Frankly, that's what most people are. Okay, most people are just fanatics. They're just kooks. They're just religious fucking kooks. So the religious kooks are religious kooks, and the science, most of the people who think they're doing science are mostly religious kooks. You can see it. Look at all the tinfoil hatters all doing, free energy and, spiral special singularity universes and fractals and all kinds of, they're putting all kinds of little magical crap into their shit because they're all fanatical religious kooks. And yes, it's really hard to argue with people who are stupid enough to fall for absolute crap. But that's what we have to do, frankly, okay? The world is an idiot. We have to somehow reform the idiot. To pretend you can just sit there and say, well, I'm not going to argue with idiots. Well, frankly, then you're not going to argue with anybody, and you're not going to change a motherfucking thing. All right, you are spending blah, 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 against proverbial object. Okay, also, in my humble opinion, again, do I need it? Why don't you send an email with your fucking humble opinions? Why do you have to post them publicly? That's a reasonable question, isn't it? I mean, you're basically giving me private, personal advice here in the comment section. Like I should give you advice on how to have sex, with your mates, publicly. I should point out to you, well, since you got a small dick, then you have to do certain things, to try to get the woman excited, because she ain't going to be, she's not going to notice when your dick's in the vagina, so I'll have to explain to you how you have to do a few little extra things to make it seem like you have a bigger dick. I'll give you advice publicly. How about that? Cunt. Also, in my humble opinion, it makes you look somewhat petty. Oh, it makes me look petty to provide people an opportunity to slander me. Okay, yeah. Like crumbling baby seals for kicks. So again, I don't think that's how it appears at all. Like I said, I'm the Davy fighting the monstrous, retarded Cyclops Goliath. Okay? So I don't, you say I'm somehow insulting my dignity. Well, fuck you. I think I'm doing what the honorable man does. I'm fighting as good a fight as I can, you fucking cunt. As long as you are making videos for public consumption, complaining about comments being off topic, why are you following them off your topic? All these topics are important. So again, the only problem is, as I see it, is the waste of time in the redundancy, all right? Starting over on the subject every fucking time. Having to have a conversation with some idiot who doesn't know I've made over 100 videos on the two-slit experiment and just pretending that somehow I'm not one of the most... I've seen more two-slit experiments than I contend than pretty much, certainly 99% of the world's population. I mean, the top 1% of the top 1% in the people who've seen the most single and double slit experiments. So yeah, I do know what the fucking thing is about. So anyway, so just fuck you in this fucking whatever this is, this public ridicule crap. Fuck you. Alright, sir, fuck you again. Would you recommend any text? Oh, so he thinks I'm too stupid to figure out how to argue on the internet, but he's going to take my recommendations. that might help support your unification theory. Well, if I knew that, if I thought there was somebody else who was rational on planet Earth, I'd have a big giant banner pointing right to his channel, you know, saying, "Yeah, this guy has got it. He's not an idiot like all the rest of you fuckers." So yes, no, unfortunately, everyone else on the planet is a dumb fuck. And I'm apparently the only one who can do this little bit of rational discernment where I can tell complete bullshit. You know, I can actually smell bullshit. Apparently nobody else has this capacity. I have a magic capacity to smell bullshit. Photons travels through both slits and it turns into a wave function and then does calculus and it decides where to land. Yeah, I didn't fall for that. Shit. Alright, or is it something wholly original? Yes, it's wholly original. Yes, the whole channel is a display of the wholly originalness of it. The fucking theory started off as just a stating that gravity was a particle. That's all. I mean, I start off with a very meager ambition, which was just to point out that no, gravity isn't bent space, that a particle theory works perfect. And, you know, you assholes falling for this bent space crap are just being assholes. That's how it started. And then, yeah, once I started thinking through it and trying to make it work in different ways, then I hit on the magnetism thing, and that made it quite obvious that all these forces are the same fucking goddamn thing. Also, can you recommend any reading that might, in turn, not turn me into a dogmatic moron? Well, being dogmatic and understanding science are two different things. I mean, understanding that it's, you know, as I just did, being hyperbolic or being a little too full of yourself can be dangerous. So you ought to always want to be a little bit humble. Is a little bit different. You know, having an open mind. Open enough. Not so open that your brain falls out. That kind of thing. That's a whole different subject. How to moderate your perspective enough not to fall for bullshit, but at the same time not to be close-minded. That is a tricky tightrope to walk. But yeah, no, I don't have nothing to recommend. Frankly, yes, I'm totally discouraged about the state of the human condition because every single fucker on earth that ever wrote a book wrote a stupid book. They all suck. I can't recommend anything because everything sucks. Such that I may educate myself specifically on the topics of your videos cover. Thank you. Yeah, you just have to do it piece at a time. I've sort of made it clear that I've gained a hell of a lot of knowledge by watching college lectures. You just have to recognize that, oh, this is the section where they talk complete shit. So they have lots of good experiments. Watch experiments. That's always a good thing to do. But always be cautious because, yes, experiments are always set up to work. They're not set up to fail. So they've always been rigged a little bit, you know, tinkered with, played with. And they have deceptions built into them. And you have to watch out for those. All right, I guess we can leave that comment. All right, now should I take on another subject since I'm here? Might as well. All right, so the D. Hilster guy. That's not the right video.
At light.
So this was actually a lecture that's, he gets into, this is an optics lecture from a university. And it's a little hard to follow, so I haven't finished all of these yet because, you know, it gets really complicated. And they never get to the real, like, they're always trying to do it in terms of everything being a fucking wave. So all of their analysis is biased to this stupid wave crap. So anyway, this is the one I want. All right, so this is an interesting subject, photons, and I just thought this was kind of funny how he came to understand photons as a whole bunch of stuff, and you're just like, no, that can't be the right answer. You know, it is very corpuscular. But that whole argument, so let's go into that a little bit, because it gets a little bit, see, this is another one of those things where we can only know it based on its actions. You know, we have to know a photon indirectly. We can't directly in any way see it or interact with it or have any notion of it indirectly. So we can only tell when it's done something to something else bigger in the environment that we are able to measure its movement or how it's affected. And so when Feynman says it's a clump, in a sense it's sort of a deception, because the only way we know it existed is because it did something clumpy, in the sense that it moved an electron. But if it doesn't move the electron, it doesn't mean it didn't exist. It just means it didn't move it enough for the electron to do its cascade thing. It's the chain reaction that we're measuring. So we're always measuring some sort of chain reaction. The photomultiplier is a perfect example because that's just so overt. Like you need a certain amount of energy in, and then there's a cascade of electrons that create a big signal that we can see, and we say, a photon hit. So yeah, of course we're going to say it's quantized, because every time we look at it, we're only seeing when it actually forces the boulder to fall off the cliff, right? So it's like a teetering boulder, and you're hitting it with stuff. Well, the only time you're going to know that something hit it is when there was enough stuff hitting it to knock over the boulder. There's no other way to see it. But there could be photons that are weak, and they don't knock the boulder over, so we don't even know they exist. So that's what I'd say gravity is like. Gravity's doing that all the time. It's all around us, hitting us all of the time. And we have no way to directly measure it. The only way we measure it is based on how much we move. And it's, there's no way to measure it in terms of the tiny bits of it, because it's so tiny. There's a gazillion of them hitting my fingernail, I mean, you can't measure like, there's 1 gazillionth of a photon less. I blocked one. So, I got one less photon hitting it. You wouldn't be able to measure that. So the other thing that's interesting, so it's like, since I was a kid, this was my vision of a photon, right? It was just stuff at a distance. And once in a while, I would try to make their thing work, where I'd say, okay, well, maybe the photons are some sort of long thing, and they're separated by a little distance, and this is what they're doing, But, that starts to break down pretty quick when you start thinking about a mile-long radio wave or something. You're saying that ain't going to work, And so, but this was my first vision of a photon. So when they said photon, this is what I thought of. And so they were saying it was this, crap. I'm saying, no, it's not any of that crap. It's this simple thing. It's stuff at a distance. Now, the question is, how much stuff at a distance? See, I mean, you can't really say, well, what's a photon? Is a photon 2 of these things at a minimum, right? You need 2 of them to be able to measure the wavelength. So you have no wavelength unless you have at least 2 quanta. But is it 3 quanta, 4 quanta? How many quanta do you need in the ray of light before you can recognize it? Now, it seems that our eyes, there's 2 ways to look at it. Our eyes either require a long ray, so, like 6 of these to hit it, or it needs actually more than 1 ray, like 6 rays. So 6, different photons have to hit, rays of light have to hit for us to recognize, that's light hitting us, a photon. So this is where it gets kind of weird, is that we're not really going to be able to detect it so there could be a photon that's only 2 or 3 of these little things. And we might have no real way of measuring that, because it won't be enough to push the electron hard enough, to give the electron enough momentum for the electron to start swinging back and forth. So that the idea is the electron is in tension. I'm not in the drawing board. Eraser time, Gary. Erase. Yeah. Erase. Okay. So the idea would be is the electron. There's lots of ways to draw it, but just to make it simple, so you can kind of think of electrons as being, tied to each other through tension. So if there was electrons, you can think of it as being like a rubber band between them, because there's force bouncing between them, and they're tied to the proton. In the sense they're attracted to the proton, and they're repelled by the other electrons. And that's essentially creates what you could illustrate, or fairly illustrate, as a rubber band mechanism, in that I'm using green, doesn't mean anything, that they can bounce between these different locations. So it's like if they get hit, they push in, and then it goes back this way, and then it goes back this way, and it goes back this way, and it goes back this way. All right, and like a pendulum, the time it takes to go this little distance will be the same as the time it took it to go this far distance. So you could understand that if it's shooting something back out each time it stops and starts, so when it stops, it shoots something that way, and when it starts, it shoots something. When you first hit it, it gives you a reflection. So it gives you a bot back, because it's eating this direction, okay, the in direction, and it throws out the away direction. So this is your equal but opposite little bit. And then when it stops here, it shoots out a bit going this way. It gives back the energy this way, and now it moves back this way. And then when it stops here again, okay, it gives back this energy, and it moves back this way. So you can see that because the time is going to be the same, that this essentially will just create your bullets. Okay, it's just going to shoot your bullets at a set interval of time, depending on how sprung, okay, how much spring you put into it will dictate how fast your initial pressure is, the speed of the electron. And the speed of the electron vibrating back and forth will tell you what your frequency is going to be. So, that mechanism, in my opinion, works as a simplification of an idea of where do photons come from. So they're individual little things, and they come from electrons. And we kind of know this. Electrons produce photons. It's just kind of, we know this, right? This isn't complicated. It's not some bizarre concept. And this is a perfectly reasonable understanding of the mechanism. So the electron itself isn't, whoa, it isn't going this. It isn't vibrating to create a photon. It's moving to create a photon. And to move, essentially think of it as like it's Velcro, and the photon sticks to it. Okay, and now it has the momentum of the photon. Now it's not going to go the speed of light because the photon is tiny, electron's big. So it's just going to move the velocity of the photon spread over the mass of the electron. So the electron will move 1/10 of the speed, or 1/100th of the speed of the photon that sticks to it with the Velcro. So it absorbs that. But when it absorbs that, it can't get any bigger. So when it absorbs something, it always has to throw back something else. So it obviously throws back the thing going the opposite direction. And that model works. That's all I'm saying. It works as an explanation. Alright, so let's play with this. So I got to turn this off once we're done drawing, I think. And then I probably have to make this a little bigger. Probably have to. Might help, I don't know. Well, anyway, we'll just play some of this.
Stated. And the interesting part is that the wavelength of this stream of particles is defined by the distance between this peak and that peak. And that's exactly the way we define the wavelength, and it's in meters.
So anyway, I guess I missed the part, but he was saying that, he was thinking about one particle with spin, which I don't know why you would spin a particle. That's just making things insanely complicated for no good reason. And then he tries 3 particles, each with specific spins for the colors. And again, he's saying we can't explain white light, and that's why he had to let go of this idea of one particle. But I guess I'm just saying, I don't know why you can't see how one particle works perfectly fine. Why doesn't one particle work? Light does behave as if it's bullets at a frequency in lots and lots of experiments, so why would you find that a problem? And then, well, I'll play it, but white light doesn't exist. So I don't know, he's saying, well, I couldn't make white light. Well, you don't have to make white light. We already know that the photons never are white. There's no white photon. There's no such thing as the white frequency. It doesn't exist. Okay, so You don't have to account for white. There's never a white photon. There's a combination of photons that can make white, the illusion of it, but there's no such thing as a white photon.
Nanometers maybe, but still, it's a physical dimension. And if you have a peak here and a peak sometime later as it goes through space, you have a wavelength. My first attempt was just a series of numbers. I was trying to make a sine wave, but
See, and so I'm saying to myself, why would he try to make a sine wave? There's absolutely no physical evidence that photons travel as a sine wave. The sine wave is just a representation of the fact that there's a frequency. And so they've imposed that with their oscilloscopes. They've synthesized it. They've never measured a sine wave. They've never measured a photon as a sine wave. Again, we can't measure photons. We can only measure what they do to electrons. And so then you're just adding a bunch of, if you have a whole bunch of photons coming in creating energy, obviously they'd be creating it at different levels and different points, and that would create an average. So the sine wave is just an average of the fact that there's an on point and an off point, in the signal. And the off and ons can be at different locations, which would mean, completely out of phase. And so if you took all those things out of phase, you would say, oh yeah, it's a sine wave in the end. So, it's just an averaging of the effect. But it has nothing, there's no evidence of a sine wave. There's no obligation for you to conform your vision of a photon into this synthetic oscilloscope image of reality, because it has nothing to do with what actual photons are doing. There's no physical evidence that there's a sine wave in a photon anywhere.
But I said, okay, let's just take three numbers. And much later, when I realized that you plot these numbers using a spreadsheet, it's a triangular wave. Well, what's really interesting about that is it really leads to the notion that whether your distribution emulates a sine wave or a triangular wave or a pulse or a square wave
So let's understand that their vision of this thing is there's no minus, plus photon then minus photon. The photon's never doing a minus thing. So they're just counting that as the full amplitude. So this wave would be above zero anyway. There would be no ground. This would all be above ground. So it doesn't even make sense in that respect. There's just no reason to think. As Feynman said, it is clumps. And it's just understanding how the clumps are interpreted by something even clumpier, the electron.
anything rather unique, very odd-shaped wave. This model can do all of them. For example, my son David, when he got onto it and I told him about it, he decided to make an ideal sine wave. And he used the mathematics of a sine wave, and he used it to calculate the spacing.
So he averaged it. So again, he just averaged it over 100 particles or more, clearly more, 200 particles. So he averaged what a sine wave would look like over 200 particles of equal distribution in sections. But why would you even think this is what a photon is, in terms of having this low part and then this high part and then this low part, when we know it's a no part? Okay, there's photon, no photon, photon, no photon. And radio makes that really kind of obvious, I think. The radio tower radiates a bunch of photons, and then there's no photons, and then there's a bunch of photons, and then there's no photons, and then there's a bunch of photons. The signal is an on-off signal sent to the frickin' radio tower. There's no sine wave of make a lot of photons and then make very little photons and then make a lot of photons and make none of that crap is happening.
Of these peaks, and so he's got particles moving to the right at speed c. The fact that you have, I know it's only 4, but lots of particles here and lots of particles here, and in the valley you have very few.
So again, he's saying this is one photon. One photon is made up of a whole bunch of photons, photonies, microphotons, mini-me photons, it's probably a better way. Photonicals, made up of a bunch of photonicals.
what you'd have to generate, what nature would have to generate if it's going to make a perfect sine wave out of a stream of particles. Yes, it can be done.
So, again, this is, if you're going to give photons this much energy in terms of your G1 particles or whatever you want to call these, that's an insane amount of energy, you know. And so then whatever else you create is going to have even more and more. And where's the engine that is manufacturing all of these? Producing a vector for all of these, controlling how many are coming out. How is the electron or the atom doing that? How is it shooting out? Well, just shoot out 15 of them, and then wait a while, and then shoot out 15, and then shoot 15, 15, 15, 15, and then shoot out 15, 15, 15. How is all that complexity? How are you gonna give an electron the capacity to do all of this complex work? You have to have a simpler diagram, not a more complex diagram. This is almost more complex than their silly field waves. This isn't an improvement. It's a step kind of sideways.
And by the way, the intensity of the sine wave, if I wanted a higher intensity sine wave using the particle model, I would have 8 or 100 or 1,000 particles at the peak. And
so again, that doesn't even make any sense, because we know intensity is number of photons themselves. More photons make more intense light. That there are single corpuscular kind of things, and that you're just making more pixels, more LEDs, so to speak. That you can't make the individual photons stronger and weaker. There aren't strong photons, weak photons. You can't make the single photon more intense.
Very few in the valley. So the intensity of the particle model wave is the number of particles at the peak.
So he's saying, yes, the number of particles in the single photon. But we know that intensity of light is created by more light, more photons, not stronger photons, not vitamin pill, underdog super energy pill photons, just more. More is intensity. And it's basically the photons are the things they hit individual electrons.
Peak. That's the number of peak. That peak hits your eye. It hits the red. If this is a red wavelength, that when this peak hits your eye, it pushes on the red cone in your eye. And if there's too many of these particles hitting the red cone of your eye, you actually can damage that. Just physically.
All right. So it doesn't make any. So he's saying a single photon could damage your eyes, because it'd be some sort of super heavy photon. So again, this is where this just goes totally south. This is so far, this is so inconsistent with evidence that you could say, yes, no, you're going way off on a wacky tangent, because we've never been able to manufacture a single photon that, weighs as much as a dog or something. You can't do that. You can't make heavy photons.
Damage by changing the atomic and molecular structure of the cone in your eye. It's exactly how it works.
No, it's not even. You shouldn't be able to say it's exactly how it works. That's not exactly how it works. It's not even close to how it works.
Okay.
Damage your eye, you have to hit it with higher frequency photons. The number isn't going to do you any good unless they're like. Obviously, you could burn the surface of your eye with infrared, but you really can't hurt your eyes with low frequency light. If you want to do damage to your eyes, you need high frequency light. But clearly, like a red laser shot right into your eye, that could certainly do damage, but it's going to do damage through what? Burning. Because of the number of photons and converting the energy of the light. It's not the light that's causing the problem, it's the fact that the light, when exposed to the tissue in that volume, will create excessive heat, and you'll burn the retina. You won't shock the retina with too much light. You'll burn the retina with too much heat.
Exactly how I came up with the idea of what the electromagnetic wave would look like. And by the way, when it's a particle, it's not electromagnetic.
So again, when he says it's a particle, he's saying a photon isn't a particle. It's like a million particles. So again, it just language gets all muddled here.
It's not like that waveform I showed you earlier with oscillating electric field perpendicular to an oscillating magnetic field moving through space. It's just particles moving through open space. Now,
Yes, one photon is a million little subtons somehow ordered and arranged by some process to be left undescribed.
there's two other videos you may want to watch. One's called The Candle and one's called The Light Bulb, which I get into quite a bit of detail about how light is generated. This is natural. The light bulb is a man-made device, but in many respects, at the point at which it's generating light is also very much a natural phenomenon.
I've watched all his videos and I didn't find them all that informative. But the candle was interesting conversation, but it's not just about how different heat creates different light. But that's kind of intuitively sensible, that the more agitated the electrons are, the more likely they are to create photons.
These streams are not perfect sine waves when they're released, and I'm going to go through this a little bit.
Well, they might try to make them into a perfect sine wave. Why even having a conversation about a sine wave? Why don't you just say there's 50,000 G1 particles, then there's nothing, and then there's 51,000, and then there's nothing, and then there's 51,000. Why don't you just... That would work just as well, wouldn't it? Why are you bothering waving your photon, your particle? Why are you forcing your particle to wave?
I'm going to cover a little bit of the candle, but these streams are what I call messy. Now, in that video about the candle, I showed this slide. This is an actual picture of a candle which shows blue light, red into yellow, white, more red and yellow, and then red at the top. This particular came from another reference, and I'll show you that later.
So this gets kind of complicated. It's not a simple thing because it obviously has to do with where there's more ions. Where there's more ions, you'll get more blue light, blah, 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 blah. So it doesn't really reflect necessarily heat. It reflects the ability of electrons to be vibrated.
Defines the candle in 5 different zones. The wax is melting, vaporizes. With the wick burning, it melts the wax. And then you get these various zones. So let's go through each one. Zone 1 is the non-luminous zone. This is this little blue zone down here. Says there's not enough oxygen for the fuel to burn. So no light. It's kind of trapped inside by the zone 2, which is the blue zone. And there's plenty of oxygen for there. You get a complete burning here. Complete burning. And it's you can actually, it's almost translucent. You can see through it. By the way, let me back up. This non-luminous zone is generally about 600 degrees C. Now, these numbers that he quotes look a little bit fictitious. They're all nicely ordered. Don't think a candle is that way, but the point being that this is one of the lowest temperatures in here. When you get to this blue zone, blue is at 800 degrees C. And I was often told when I was younger that the blue flame was the hottest. That's not what it says here.
Right. Well, this isn't too informative. We already did this, frankly. So we'll call it a day. But anyway, the subject is kind of interesting. I would argue that, see, I thought about this with polarizing film also. These polarizers end up destroying some light, right? I mean, they're only 30% efficient. Let's say the average polarizing film is, say, 35 or something, 40% efficient. So somehow it's killing some light. It's destroying it some way. But it doesn't get incredibly hot, indicating it absorbed those photons. So the argument could be made it just made them unresolvable as photons. That is, it broke the frequency. So I'll provide explanation in the illustrative forum. So, a simple argument would be is, the photons have a pattern of their frequency. And you could kind of understand that if they went through a polarizer, some sort of obstacle I put up here, little jail bars or whatever, and they have some, like one of them's up a little, one of them's down a little, one of them's up a little, so they're a little bit off. And so this photon gets through the bars, fine, but this photon, this little bit, hits a bar. Well, now my frequency is twice the frequency. So it's not going to be, so even if this one gets through, so this one got through, this one didn't get through, this one gets through, you can see that now the frequency's been broken. So it's, the tons aren't at the same consistent distance. And so they can't be received by an electron and do the clump thing. The electron can't react because you're not loading the spring. You load it, you push, and then you don't push. That means the electron starts going back. Then when you hit it again, it's going to say, no, that's not a frequency. I mean, you can't do that. I'm just going to stay here. You're canceling. You're destructively, you're off resonance. So once your frequency isn't consistent, then you're not going to be able to create a resonant vibration in the electron. So without the resonant vibration, you can't create the same photon back. So in essence, you still have energy going through, but the energy now is in the form of gravity. And you can't really measure it because it's such a tiny amount of gravity that you're not going to say, oh, I just got hit by a big pile of gravity because of those photons that went through the filter that I didn't see as photons. So I guess I would argue that until they do some thermodynamic experiment where they actually show how the polarizing film gets hot enough to represent the energy conservation necessary, that would be interesting, right? Put a polarizer inside of a vacuum chamber, shoot light into it, and see if all the heat comes out of the polarizer, or whether some of the energy doesn't leave as light, but leaves as something. That would be an interesting experiment. But again, it's such a tiny amount of energy. Nobody really understands. Photons are a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of energy, and they only seem like a lot of energy because they affect electrons specifically, and they affect them dramatically. So it's really the electron's overreaction to stuff coming at a frequency, the fact that it has a tipping point. So, and again, we're back to the tipping point argument. I make something and I say it's quite stable. I put a mass on top of a stick and it's quite stable. I can throw rocks at it, I can throw all kinds of shit at it, and it's not going to fall over. It's just going to wobble a little. But if I hit it with a specific frequency, all right, I can get it to start tipping, and I'll get it to fall over. And so at one frequency, the thing seems very vulnerable. But at any other frequency, it's solid. And that's sort of how electrons are. So we have this false notion that photons are really powerful when they're really incredibly weak. And the only thing that gives them power is they have the key to disrupting electrons. They know that electrons can be put on resonance, and you can cause them to wobble and fall out. Alright, well, that's enough of a video. I believe so. Yes. The end. Yeah. The end of the video. Thank you very much. Please, come again. Subscribe. Love me. Give me a hug. Hit the little hug button. There's probably a hug button, right? There's got to be a hug button, right? Oh, God, I hate this place. I did find out something very interesting. I have to point it out to my other channel. Let's see if you can see it on here. Let's see what shows up. Ooh, no, you can't see it. Alright, well, if you follow this stuff over to the right, there's a little thing that has ... on it. Okay? So if you follow the thumbs up thing, and next there's share, and then there's the save, and then there's a little ... thing. And if you click that, it's got this thing called Open Transcript. And guess what? It opens a transcript. I mean, the transcript of the whole video. It's really cool. So, and if you can't just, you have to select all. So hit select all, and then you can copy it. But see, it selects the whole page then, which is sort of retarded. So you can just go to the top of it and then do shift. You can just click on the top of the transcript and then go to the bottom of the transcript. You can see some of this, right? Yeah, you can see some of it. Then you go to the bottom of the transcript. And you get rid of the time codes. So there's another option, you get rid of the time codes, which is really good too. And so then you end up with a transcript. I mean, it's not a perfect transcript. Obviously, it's a computer-generated transcript. Hey, this is a damn long one. Thank you for your attention. Then you go to the bottom and you hit Shift. And there you go. You selected it all. And then you just go copy. And you got the whole transcript of the video. So anyway, just a little YouTube perk that I didn't... I was looking. I'm saying, where are these transcripts? I know they were making them. And I'm saying, where the fuck are they? And they're hidden under that little dotty thing. It's stupid, crappy. You know, they hide stuff, you know. It's part of the conspiracy. So you can't really see it here because I've opened the transcript. So I closed the transcript. So yeah, you still can't see it, but it's over that way. So you go past the thumb up thing. Share, save, ... It's under the ... Alright, so enough of the video now. I know I went past the end. I already had the end came up and I'm still making a video. So that's probably a violation of some kind of rule. So I'll probably get a strike on my channel for that. Damn. Anyway, till next time.